There were a lot of people, fans, Twitter, media types, that were really big on the possibilities and the potential of the San Francisco 49ers for the 2018 season. I was kind of lukewarm on it, if you remember. I didn't really buy this hype train. I didn't really buy that this team was all that good. I kind of do believe in Kyle Shanahan as a play caller and head coach, yes. But I didn't really see the overall level of talent on both sides of the ball to command this type of attention or love or respect. And sorry, frankly, not a believer in Jimmy Garoppolo. Still not a believer in Jimmy Garoppolo. Still think it was absolutely idiotic to give him all that money based off of 5 starts. That's the way it looks to me. And when you see, and regardless of what you want to say, when you see guys from that 2017 draft class like Mahomes, like Watson, to a lesser degree Trubisky, it makes what the 49ers did with the Jimmy G deal look even more ludicrous, ridiculous, and stupid. It just does. And I think it's going to be a harbinger of teams really rethinking how they handle the quarterback position in the future. But you sign Jimmy G to this big contract extension, even if it is only for a couple of years, still the principle of it. You spend money on guys like Jerick McKinnon, Richard Sherman, and Weston Richburg, and people are thinking, hey, bring in Richard Sherman. They've got Jimmy G. He's going to be special. Jerick McKinnon will give him another dimension in the backfield. And a lot of that shit didn't happen. Now, I will say the 49ers were competitive in some games, and at times I liked the way they played, but they just weren't a very good team. Like, the reality of it is, especially when you lose McKinnon to the ACL tear, early on in the year you'd have put up so many hopes and aspirations behind Jimmy Garoppolo staying healthy for a full season. He goes out in that game in week 3 and tears up his damn knee like a knucklehead, get out of bounds. The season just went into a tailspin really quickly. It's not that much of a surprise, I suppose. When you look at them, you can see the effects of the coaching, and you can see that they were getting the most out of what they had. 14th in the league in passing yards a game on offense, 13th in the league in rushing yards a game, 14th in total yards per game. When you talk about this 49ers team, they had C.J. Beathard in there for a little bit, but then Nick Mullins comes in, and all of a sudden you look at Nick Mullins, and you're like, I don't know if he's a long-term starter in the league, but he certainly earned himself a job in the league for a long time, at worst as a backup, and maybe someday he'll get an opportunity to start. He was impressive for what he had around him, what he was tasked with, the situation he was thrown into. I thought he was impressive. Not studly by any sense of the imagination, but he didn't go out there and fully fall off flat on his face. He didn't. Matt Breida, the running back, not that big, but he played big. I mean, they were getting good performances out of guys that they weren't anticipating having to rely upon before the season started. George Kittle was the best tight end in the league this year. I mean, he was just ridiculous, man. Just ridiculous. And think about that. Going through 3 different starting quarterbacks, Kittle still did what he did. A guy that was a 5th-round pick. That's nuts. Robbie Gould being good as gold like he usually is. I mean, there were good things about this 49ers offense. He had 3 games, they scored 30 or more points. Unfortunately, they had 9 games where they scored less than 20 points. But that was just in general because of a lack of horsepower, a lack of talented personnel on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they were kind of middle of the road. They weren't terrible. They weren't great. But 11th in the league in passing yards allowed a game, 14th in the league in rushing yards allowed a game, 13th overall in yards allowed per game. So their defense had them in positions to win some games that they didn't win. And you can see that by the fact that they had 6 losses by 8 points or less. So 6 one-score losses. You look ahead to the next year and you say, this team wasn't that far away. And as crazy as that seems, they might not have been that far away. They were still a little bit of ways away. They weren't there yet, kind of like I thought. But they weren't that bad. When you look at them compared to their division mates, the Arizona Cardinals, to me, you feel more optimistic about the 49ers, even with the questions about Jimmy G and some other questions about them, than you would the Cardinals at this point. Although you got to say, the fact that the 49ers lost to the Cardinals twice this year makes you feel a little less positive. That's bad. That's bad. You can't lose to the Cardinals twice. The fucking Cardinals. But when you look at this team, again, this offseason, they're going to have a bunch of cap space, $62 million or so. They're going to have money to spend. Will they go out there and make a big trade for somebody like an Antonio Brown? Will they spend money on somebody like a Le'Veon Bell? They've got some money. They don't need to go out there and sign a bunch of guys. They kind of need to roll the dice and try to find a couple of impact players, a couple of real difference makers, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And they've got some of the cap space to be able to do that. They most certainly do. Like in theory, and I know it's unlikely, but in theory, they have enough cap space to be able to bring in Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. I don't know if that's what they want to do. I don't know if that's what they should do. But I'm just saying, to give you an illustration, they can bring in those two guys, one via free agency, one via trade, and still have money to probably go get a third real impact player. So they're not in a bad space in terms of their cap situation. Where you have to be a little concerned, maybe, is John Lynch as the general manager and his drafting. Fair enough. But it's kind of a depends on your perspective type of thing. And here's what I mean. You look at the 2017 draft class. It was John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan's first draft. Solomon Thomas, I have to admit, as much as I loved him, he's a bust so far. I was wrong, period. Reuben Foster got cut because he won't leave that bitch alone and he keeps getting domestic violence charges. Some point in time, whether they're true or not, you keep putting yourself in that situation. I feel no sympathy for you whatsoever. And clearly, the Redskins did because they signed him. Ahkello Witherspoon, C.J. Beathard, Joe Williams is gone. George Kittle's a stud. Trent Taylor plays a little. DJ Jones. I mean, you look at that 2017 draft class, their best pick by far, was a fifth-round tight end from Iowa and George Kittle. So it's good that you got an all-pro level, Pro Bowl level player in the fifth round. It's not good when you did that and you had 2 first-round picks and you whiffed so far on both of them. But there are plenty of general managers that kind of whiff in their first drafts. I will use the Bears as an example. At 2001 draft for Jerry Angelo, his first draft, David Terrell was his pick at number 8. Terrell was a huge bust. The A-Train, Anthony Thomas, had a nice first couple of years, and soon after, he was out of the league. It was a third-round pick. Was that Mike Gandy? Ugh. You know what I mean? I mean, it was not a good draft. But by 2006, the Bears were in the Super Bowl. Ryan Pace, 2015. I loved Kevin White, and again, I was wrong. Injuries just robbed him of everything. It happens. He flopped miserably on his first-round pick in that draft. Granted, hit on some other picks in that draft, that's for sure, but ultimately whiffed massively on the first-round pick. But yet the Bears were in the playoffs this year and probably should have went further than they did. Point I'm getting at is a lot of these first-time general managers, especially in their first drafts, the story can be It can take some time to figure things out. But you look at the 2018 draft for John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. Mike McGlinchey, your first-round pick, offensive tackle. He might have been, even though he gets none of the media hype of Quentin Nelson, he may have been the best rookie offensive lineman in the league this year. He might have been. Dante Pettis in the second round. He wasn't bad. He showed you some potential, some promise. You've got some hope there. Fred Warner came in and was a speedy, athletic linebacker that they really needed, especially with what happened with Reuben Foster. Fred Warner might help you get over the fact that Reuben Foster was a first-round pick the year before and is already cut. A pick like Fred Warner can help overcome that. Tarvarius Moore has potential. DJ Reed has potential. Marcel Harris has some potential. Like, that draft class was much better. So, as bad as people are going to point at that 2017 draft class, and understandably so, because ultimately, you can call it revisionist history, you can call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, your job is to get it right. And the San Francisco 49ers whiffed massively by not drafting Patrick Mahomes or even Deshaun Watson or hell at this point even Mitchell Trubisky to then in the midseason trade a second-round pick for Jimmy Garoppolo to give him a couple of starts at the end of last year and a couple of starts during the beginning of this year. That's what get those things right. And again, we can talk about revisionist history, but that's ultimately how you're judged. So this third draft for Lynch and Shanahan
is going to be key. And what do they need to do? Well, I think it's obvious. They've got to beef up that offensive side of the ball. They need some playmakers at wide receiver. They've got their stud at tight end. They need a running back too, in a bad way. Whether that comes via draft or free agency, trade, they need one. Same thing with wide receiver. Frankly, you could acquire one in one of those ways in free agency or trade and still need to draft one because their skill position players are not that great. Breida helps make it a little bit of a lesser need, but do you really want to rely on him being your top guy out of the backfield going forward? Probably use some help on the interior of that offensive line. And yes, defensively on that front seven. They need some speed on the perimeter, meaning specifically at edge rusher and an outside linebacker to go with Warner. That's why a lot of people will be looking at this team and saying that Nick Bosa is a natural fit for them at number 2, which is crazy because over recent years they've drafted defensive linemen multiple times in round 1. Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, Solomon Thomas with mixed results. Armstead, Buckner, stud. Thomas, But you get Nick Bosa in there, now you've got a difference maker as an edge rusher. It makes a lot of sense. And as bad as they need help on the offensive side of the ball, specifically with skill position players, it'd be really hard to pass up on a Nick Bosa if he's there at number 2. If he's not there at number 2, then it would be really interesting to see what this team does. Be really, really interesting to see what this team does. Maybe it would be a Josh Allen. Maybe. Who knows? But I look at this 49ers team, and I will say, as much as I want to rag on him for the Garoppolo contract, as much as I want to rag on him for certain things, the fact is they weren't that bad in 2018. And with some shrewd moves, a nice draft, and a little bit better health and luck, the 49ers might be in 2019 what a lot of people envisioned would be in 2018.